crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are going to deal with a topic of conversation tonight we have never dealt with in hundreds of shows, so stick around for that. Before we get into the conversation and introduce tonight's panel of experts, a couple of reminders. The numbers that you need to know to join the conversation. It's always better when you're a part of it. 205-670-1949. That's the number to text, and the call number 844-LAW-TALK, 844-529-8255. And also, don't forget, a great benefit to this show, something that Hollis Wright provides each and every time we do the attorneys, every Sunday night. Attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live. That is a free, confidential, and all-fair conversation. So if you'd rather not your question be asked, but you want to talk to an attorney, opportunity tonight to get that done. So give them a call. Leading our conversation, he's the managing partner of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you again.
Happy New Year.
Hope you were well.
Happy New Year.
Happy 2020.
How about that?
This is going to be the year. I feel it. Do you feel it?
I do feel it. I think this is going to be our year. Your year and my year together, along with our guests. But, you know, we have done some 400 shows. I don't know what the count is at, but it's a lot of shows. We have never done a show related to property tax and delinquencies and what to do in those circumstances. And so this is unique. We don't generally run across that. But you know what? We've got someone at our firm that kind of manages and handles and comes up with these topics. Right. And this was a good one, and came to me and said, hey, do you want to do something unique and new that we hadn't done before? I said, let's do it. So we're lucky today to have Greg Stanley on. Greg is a local lawyer here in this area at Stanley & Associates, and we're just super excited to have you on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm actually very honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, good. We're honored to have you on. Tell us a little bit about your practice and really how you got into this area of the law, because it is a unique area.
It's an interesting story, Josh. The way it started was several years ago. I was an investor in tax liens. So I would buy tax liens, and I wasn't an attorney. And I was active duty Air Force. And then when I retired from the Air Force, I always wanted to go to law school, so I went to law school. And when I graduated, I started handling my own legal issues that had to do with these tax liens. And the next thing I know, and I never intended to actually have a full-up practice. The next thing I know, my lawyer friends are saying, hey, can you handle this for me? You know, my investor lawyer friends are saying, hey, can you handle this for me? Pretty soon, now we've moved into the Ramsey building across from the library in Irondale. And I've got two associates, and we're overwhelmed.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the topic itself. I don't think people realize, David, what property taxes actually help fund in society. It's a lot of stuff. Let's talk just a little bit about that. I mean, property taxes are significant in Alabama. I mean, we just think, well, we all have to pay property taxes for our businesses. We got to pay property taxes for our homes. But the reality is property taxes go to a lot of important things.
That's true. As a matter of fact, if you look at your tax bill, and now's the time of year to do that, look at your tax bill. I know when I look at my tax bill, when I say my tax bill, what I mean to say is my property tax bill. Now, typically these get paid by, you pay it into escrow each month, and your bank pays your tax bill, but you'll get the bill and you can look at it. There's 5 different line items for education on my tax bill. So, you know, we're paying the county, it goes to the city, all these different school budgets are being paid for, by and large, by property taxes.
And I guess also does property tax also go to funding certain areas of municipalities and counties and those types of things?
It does. It goes to several different areas, and it's different by county and it's different by municipality, as you may know. It's based on the mill rate, which is a percentage of the value of your property that you would pay taxes on. And just recently, as a matter of fact, just this last year, Birmingham voted to increase their mill rate. So their tax rate went up. Plus, you know that the value of land, the value of property is going up pretty rapidly throughout Jefferson County and most of Alabama.
I had heard a statistic recently that there was close to $100 million of outstanding property tax owed in the state of Alabama. Is there some truth to that?
Oh, that's exactly correct. As a matter of fact, there's resources you can look it up. As of Wright, when I last checked, over $100 million of taxes were owed, and these taxes are owed to the state, because if a person doesn't pay their taxes, then the taxes are sold on the courthouse steps, and that's a lien put on the house or on the property. If no one buys that tax lien, the state bids it in, is the phrase they use. So the state funds the county for that year, but from that point on, it's the state that is footing the bill for those taxes, and the state would be reimbursed
if someone doesn't pay it. So, I mean, but that basically creates a hole for education in counties, all those things. I mean, so it sounds like there's a marketplace out there for people that want to buy some of these liens. But just because you have a lien on your property, for example, doesn't necessarily mean you lose the property. Is that fair?
That's exactly correct. Most of the investors, like me, we're not really interested in taking the property. Yeah. But the interest rate in Alabama is very good. It's 1% a month. And where else are you going to find an investment that guarantees 1% a month and it's secured by real property? So these large institutional investors will come in and they'll drop $2 or $3 million in Jefferson County alone, in Shelby County alone, buying these tax liens. And for the next 3 years, they just accrue interest at 1% a month. And these large institutional investors, really, that's all they want. They want their 1%.
Yeah. You can see where there's a whole marketplace there.
Goodness, and $100 million. So why are those, what's the story behind that $100 million? Why are those not being paid, and who's not paying it?
That's a really good question. But, I've been doing this for a long time, and I started looking at why is it that people don't pay their taxes, and there's a couple of very common reasons. The first one is, get this, they pay off their mortgage. Think about that. If you pay off your mortgage, you've been paying into escrow for the last 20 or 30 years. Yeah. You've never paid your tax bill. The bank has always paid it. Mm-hmm. Well, then you get this bill. It's the first time in 30 years you've ever got a tax bill that you had to pay, and you don't think you're supposed to pay it. You don't even think to pay it. So ironically, paying off your mortgage tends to lead to not paying your taxes.
It's hard to believe that when you think about it. I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about kind of generally how this process works, how if someone gets delinquent in their property taxes, how they can redeem that property. We need to talk about that, because I think what Greg will tell us is there are a lot of circumstances he sees in his practice where people have maybe not done it the right way, but are able to dig themselves out with good legal counsel.
All right, let's head to break. As we do so, a quick reminder, if you'd like to join the conversation, you can text us at 205-670-1949, or you can call toll-free 844-529-LAW TALK, 844-529-8255. Stay tuned. More of The Attorney is coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was we would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
We love helping people. I think everyone at this firm feels the exact same way, that the reason we do what we do is to help people. And this show gives us the biggest platform possible to help as many people as we can in the community.
Welcome back into the attorneys. Thanks for joining us tonight. Before we get back into our conversation, just a reminder, attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by all throughout the program tonight. So just pick up the phone and give them a call. That free, off-air, and confidential conversation, a great opportunity for you. So if you have a question, you need some free legal advice, tonight is the time to get it. A question we've got here I want to jump into as we get back into our conversation here. What do I do if I realize my property sold for taxes?
That's a good question, and it is a very daunting thing when you find out that, oh my Lord, my property sold for taxes. What does that mean? Well, typically, if you realize that your property is sold for taxes and it's been within 3 years of the tax sale, okay, just go down to the courthouse and talk to the folks at Land Redemptions, and they will tell you how to begin the process of redemption, and you are guaranteed the right to redeem your property if it's been within the first 3 years after that sale. Now, there is a problem. On the 3rd anniversary of the sale, that certificate, that tax certificate, automatically becomes a tax deed. Once it becomes a tax deed, you can no longer just go down to the courthouse and write a check.
Right. So do you see that happen often, that it takes that long for someone to recognize? Like, will you get a delinquent notice, or is that part of the problem, that sometimes maybe a notice is going to someone else and they're not notifying the person that has the property? I mean, maybe it does sometimes go longer than 3 years.
Well, there's a kind of a catch-22, specifically if you don't pay your taxes and it's sold on the courthouse steps, Josh, that's the last notice you're going to get that your taxes are due. From that point on, the tax bill each year goes to the investor who bought the taxes. Now, that is obviously a problem, because if you miss the one time, you don't get any more warnings.
Yeah. Talk with me about this, because I do see this a lot in wrongful death cases that our firm handles. I will have an estate set up, and I will have an heir ask whether or not they need to pay the property taxes to keep the property current. And our general advice has always been that, yes, we need to get the property taxes paid as part of the estate process. Is that the right advice?
100%.
Okay.
Absolutely. The estate needs to keep those taxes current, because, in Alabama, the death of the owner does not void a tax sale. Divorce, change names, move, none of those things will void a tax sale. So the sale's going to be valid, and if you don't pay those taxes and the years click on and it becomes a deed, well, now you have to go to court to get it back.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions you see and mistakes that people make? I know we talked offline before we started about circumstances that you kind of see, and how maybe someone didn't get good legal advice to start with. What do you normally see? I mean, how does this come to your front doorstep?
There's two ways. We are happy to help folks who didn't pay their taxes, and so we're happy to help them redeem their property, but we also work with investors. So if an investor has bought this tax lien, the investor has the right to take possession of the property, but they don't have the right to break and enter. They don't have the right to break any other law or breach the peace. So and your question was, how do we typically find out? Well, the way we typically find out is when an investor sends a letter or some sort of a notice to the owner of the property saying, get out. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a right way to do that, and there's a wrong way to do that. There are some investors out there that are correct. They follow the law. There's an organization called the Alabama Tax Lien Association, and it provides information. It provides, for all the members, it provides letters, sample letters that will keep you out of trouble, keep you from breaching the peace or tortiously interfering with a rental contract or one of those sorts of things. But you asked the way it comes to us. The way it comes to us is either an investor says, hey, look, I want to get possession of this property, or a homeowner says, hey, look, I want to get my property back because I've received this terrible letter from this investor.
Yeah, and do you think that the letters from the investors generally are to prod the homeowner or the property owner into just paying their taxes? And I mean, is that part of kind of, if you will, redeeming the investment, being able to recoup the investment that they've got?
That's a great question. You also asked me what the biggest misconception is, and I would say that the biggest misconception about tax investors is that they're evil, that they're out there taking advantage of little old ladies. Well, that's not the case in most cases, and I'll be candid with you. There are a certain percentage of the tax lien investors who are out there. They're unscrupulous. They send threatening letters, and they don't tell the homeowner their rights. But the vast majority of these investors are like these institutionals I mentioned. They just want the 1% a month interest. They don't want to own the property, so they send letters, or they have me send letters, to prompt the owner to redeem, so that the investor doesn't have to take possession of the property. In Alabama, the law is that if an investor doesn't take possession of the property within a certain period of time, their tax lien is basically void.
Yeah.
So it dissolves. So there's some pressure on them on the investors to take possession or get it redeemed.
Yeah.
One or the other.
It's interesting that we had this show because we've had Alwyn Horn on the show before, who does a bunch of workers' comp stuff. Well, Alwyn lives in my neighborhood. He and I help manage the legal side of our homeowners association in the area that we live. Okay. We have a common area, and this is something I'm sure that Greg has heard before. We have a common area. Well, when we created the homeowners association with a common area, we did not recognize that the common area had a property tax attached to it. The first notice we got, because we all have paid our property taxes, the first notice that we got was a notice that someone had purchased the common area, which could arguably be used as a lot down the road. And we panicked. We were like, oh my goodness, did we make a mistake here? The reality was nobody really knew that we were supposed to pay that. Well, all the homeowners came together, we chipped in, and we redeemed that property and kept it inside the homeowner association. But that's a great example of how we had no idea that we had this property tax to pay in a common area in the homeowners association, but sure enough we did, and that's a good example. And the person that had purchased it was not rude, they weren't aggressive, they just invested in the property and said pay the taxes and it's yours. And so that's what we did. So I mean, it's a common example, isn't it?
And that is common areas of COAs and homeowners associations. Oftentimes when the transition from the developer to the homeowners association, that gets lost.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about whether or not these things amount to court proceeding and litigation and how that's handled. I want to talk to Greg just a little bit about that and whether or not the court systems are used in order in the redeeming process and in litigating what's owed.
All right, let's step aside. Our final break of the evening. Just a few minutes for you to join our conversation. As we head to break, a reminder, you're going to want to keep up with Hollis Wright on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, as well as Facebook. Just search Hollis Wright and you'll find him there. A great follow, really educational, informational resource there for you. Stay tuned. We're coming back. The final segment of The Attorney is coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright. In court, attorneys are not allowed to tell juries certain things. For example, we cannot talk about a defendant's net worth, meaning the defendant's ability, resources, or insurance to pay a verdict. In this week's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, why can't lawyers talk about a defendant's net worth to a jury? Now, Rule 403 of the Alabama Rules of Evidence states, in part,
Relevant evidence may be excluded if its probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice. Long-standing Alabama cases have held that the net worth of a defendant falls under this catch-all rule and is to be excluded. The reasoning behind the rule is that if a jury knows a defendant is wealthy, then the jury might award more money to the plaintiff. And this goes one step further. If an attorney makes any remarks that suggest the defendant is responsible because he is wealthy or rich and the plaintiff is poor, that can be grounds for a new trial. If you're ever on a jury, the reality in our state is this. In almost every lawsuit that goes to trial, the attorneys representing both the plaintiff and the defendant have already looked at whether there's sufficient insurance coverage or assets to satisfy a verdict. Most likely, the parties would not pursue a civil lawsuit if damages could not be paid after a jury returns a verdict. So even though lawyers cannot mention the net worth of a defendant during trial, there likely are resources available to pay a verdict in court. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. And remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. And as always, thanks for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTN 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, our final segment. Just a few minutes remaining. If you want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with those attorneys from Hollis Wright who are standing by, give them a call. Just a few minutes, about 6 minutes remaining for you to do so. Josh?
All right, so Greg, when we went to break, I mentioned I want to talk a little bit about the litigation process because I know all of this is not just simply making a phone call to someone that knows that owns the tax lien and paying them off. I mean, some of these are disputed and probably arise to some level of litigation or some level of court involvement. Explain a little bit about that and what role you play in that.
Well, from both sides, whether it's an investor who asks us to help them or whether it's an owner who wants to redeem, if it's been 3 years since the tax sale, then we're probably going to wind up in court if we can't get it resolved. And getting it resolved, I'll be candid with you, the investor is probably, once it's a deed, the investor is probably not going to just accept the taxes and interest that were paid. They're going to want money for the other expenses that they've incurred. And if you make them sue you, well, now you're going to wind up paying the attorney fees for the other side as well. So for homeowners, the thing I think would be the most important thing is move quickly. As soon as you realize you're delinquent in your taxes, move quickly. And for investors, I suspect that the thing that's probably most important is don't break the law. You know, don't threaten people. Don't try to run people out of their homes because you will wind up in court and you're probably going to lose. Yeah. And that's how we get to litigation is when either the two parties can't resolve it or if the investor has broken the law. Yeah.
You raised something that we hadn't talked about yet, and that is, even after 3 years, someone can still redeem their property?
That's right. Once it becomes a deed, a tax deed is still sort of a lien on the property, and it can be redeemed. Think of it sort of as a foreclosure. You still have a certain period of time to redeem after a foreclosure. So that's a good analogy, I think. So if it's been 3 years, you can't just go down to the courthouse and do some paperwork. You're going to wind up having probably to sue in order to get your property back. And if it's an investor who's trying to get the property, candidly, they've probably already sued you. And they've sued you to eject you from that property so they can take possession. You know, there's an old phrase, possession is 9/10 of the law. Yeah. And that is no more true than in tax liens. If you are in possession of the property, whether you're the investor or whether you're the homeowner, you have a great advantage on winding up with that property.
Do you run into conflicts? Because it sounds like in some ways your practice, and it sounds rightly so, this is what you'd have to do in this industry, is sometimes you're representing investors and sometimes you're representing individuals. Do you run into conflicts at all with that, or do you have relationships with certain investors that if they're involved in property, you just can't get involved in those cases? How does that work? Because I would think those conflicts could be complicated sometimes.
Fortunately, we haven't run into that a lot. I have an associate called Alex Davies, and he's also a Birmingham School of Law grad, okay. And he is all over that. Every time we get a new client, the first thing he comes in and tells me is, do we have a conflict with this client?
Gotcha.
And you're exactly right. If an investor who I represent is trying to take possession of property or has possession of property, and the homeowner contacts us, we have to tell the homeowner, I'll refer them to another attorney or try to help them out some way, but we can't represent them.
So in my area of practice in plaintiff personal injury litigation, there are a lot of us, as you probably see on television all the time. In your area of practice, are you a uniquity? I mean, are there a lot of others like you that do this area, or maybe some dabble in it? I mean, this sounds like such a specialty.
It really is a specialty. There are very few people in the state. There's a woman called Denise Evans, and she's been teaching classes to investors on how to invest in tax liens, and she's the matriarch of tax lien investing in this state, but she's not an attorney. So she doesn't practice the law and doesn't give legal advice, but she has connected me to some of the other attorneys in Alabama who do this. And I would say there's probably 5 in the state that know what they're doing.
You thought about teaching this yet at school? Law schools?
That's a great story.
I think he'd be good.
He would be great.
I really agree. Like, I've learned a lot about this topic. I'm fascinated by the topic.
Well, thank you. I consider that a great compliment. Thank you.
About a minute 15 remaining, just time enough for a quick final thought. And if you would, you go first, please, sir.
I think I kind of bled into my final thought a minute ago, really. I think this, if you find that your taxes were not paid, whether it's on the lot next door to your house or on your homestead, quickly get that taken care of. Contact Hollis and Wright or Stanley and Associates or somebody and get that taken care of as quick as you can. And if you're an investor, before you jump into this, learn the system, learn how to do it, talk to Denise Evans or take a class or consult with an attorney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is, all I'd say is this. This is so clearly one of these areas of the law that if you need advice, you need to get to a lawyer. Yeah. And if you can't remember who we brought on the show, call us and we're going to get you to Greg. Right. And so, you need to reach out to someone and do it quickly so that you got an opportunity to make sure you're still at an advantage to try and get these claims resolved.
Great
job, man. Great job.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate both of you.
Glad having you on.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you as well. As always, we really appreciate your time, and we'll look for you next time right here on The Attorneys. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.